That's kind of how I fix my pronunciation. And in my opinion, this is the most comprehensive practice, which is how you learn from a native speaker.
In this video, I want to share my way of using online content, specifically online English video clips to help practice and improve my spoken English. This is actually one of the ways I use to improve my English, but the English content is something I want to focus on in this video. I will cover, first of all, how I choose the content, what type of genres, what type of speakers, and then I will talk about what you should be mindful of when you're approaching each of these practice sessions. And then lastly, it's about my specific approach, which I'll illustrate with a specific example of a video clip. So it's actually so easy to find content nowadays. YouTube videos, Bilibili, ChatGPT, everything you name it. And for most content you can ever find, there's English subtitles. There's no excuse. And ideally, you want to find something that interests you, something you would normally watch, let's say when you're eating, when you're chilling at home on a Friday night, or whatever you're watching with your friend. Because if you pick the right content, the whole practice session feels less like a chore. You don't hate it as much, which helps you to build higher levels of commitment and consistency. However, there's still a few things to keep in mind when you're picking your content. Personally, I would pick contents that reflect how people will actually talk in real life. For example, I would avoid some educational content such as courses, documentaries. People in those videos, they tend to speak a lot more slower in a more articulate way, which is different from how they would normally talk in daily life. Because in those videos, people are intentionally trying to cater to a wider range of audiences. That's just making the whole material less challenging. So those contents are actually good to learn new knowledge. But if you're looking for some material to improve your spoken English, I don't think those are a good choice. And movies are not a good choice either, because first of all, most movies don't have long enough talking scenes. There's so much things going on in terms of the visuals, the sound, and everything. They kind of just distract you away from your language learning goal. And then lastly, you want to be mindful of the speakers or the kind of context they're in. I'll take Andrew Huberman, for example. So this guy kind of pops up in the past few months or a year in his neuroscience content. So I'm not a big fan, but I watched one episode or two. Because of the nature of those videos, like this guy is coming from more of an academic background. His content is more in a formal interview format where the language he used, the words he chooses, he speaks in a really articulate and clear way where most people can understand. But I don't think that's a good reflection of how he would talk to his buddies at a bar when they're drinking, for example, or when he's talking to his girlfriend, etc., etc. Right? So you want to be mindful of that. Really depends on your language learning goal. You want to pick those speakers and context accordingly. And then the second thing is you want to be really conscious on your attention. This is absolutely important because a lot of people, when they're watching videos, they kind of fall into the trap of being this entertainment content consumer where they basically start to enjoy the content. They start to, like, when they're watching a TV show or TV, they start to enjoy the content instead of focusing on the language aspect, where their brain simply becomes more passive, which is slowing down your progress in learning and improvement. Therefore, you really need to actively put your attention and cognitive power on the right place. And then it comes to the most juicy part. I will illustrate the 3 approaches I use with a real example. So I took this clip from a recent podcast / casual Q&A with one of my favorite YouTubers. So let's get into it.
All right, cool. So the first approach is actually pretty straightforward, and you focus more on the accent and your pronunciation, which is a common approach I used in the past where I still have a lot of pronunciation issues, and that's kind of how I fix my pronunciation. And I think that can be super helpful for many of you. And this approach is actually pretty straightforward, where you simply just repeat after the native speaker and you try to imitate how they pronounce certain things, how they say certain sentences. Also, you need to imitate the high and lows in their tonality, which fits into the broader context. And you want to do this in a more exaggerated way. Basically, you want to engage more of your mouth. You want to do it more than how you would normally speak. I'll talk about the reason after, but let's get into the video first.
You know what? No more being pussy.
You know what? No more being pussy.
I am gonna finally break out of my shell.
I'm gonna finally break out of my shell.
I'm gonna live my life the way I want.
I'm gonna live my life the way I want. So basically that's how I do it. You do it sentence by sentence and that's it.
And the reason you want to exaggerate in this practice is because a lot of Chinese speakers don't exaggerate or engage their facial muscles enough to the point of how a native speaker does, which is the reason they don't sound like a native speaker.
And then it comes to the second approach. Basically, I want to find a conversational clip where there's one person asking a question to another. You pause the video, imagine yourself being that second guy who's answering the question and how you will answer that question. Just go about imagine yourself in the conversation, how you talk, how you speak, and do that practice yourself. And then after that, you play the actual clip to see how that person actually answered that question. It doesn't really matter the content. What you want to focus on is how that person phrased his language. There could be certain expressions, there could be certain words that he's using but you're not, which is how you learn from a native speaker. So you basically try to take those things down and internalize those things so you can use it yourself. So the example here.
What's next for you? Like, are you producing just like, are you trying to just always think of new ideas like this show that you had with the house, with the content creators, Australia, like you're trying to do less man on the street stuff? Like, what is the next thing?
So here you can see this guy ask the question and then you pause right here. You imagine how you will answer that question, how you approach it. What are the things you're going to talk about? And then you compare what you say to what's actually in the clip.
I think man on the street is always going to be in my back pocket.
Okay.
Like if I ever needed some.
So for example, this back pocket thing, it's not in my arsenal personally, even though I understand it, but I'm probably not going to use it. It's not going to come out of my mouth. But now, once I do this exercise, I know, okay, I can say this. This is something I can use when I'm talking in the future. I'll try to internalize that. So this is how I learn from a native speaker. So you get the idea. And now it comes to the final approach, which is practicing storytelling. And in my opinion, this is the most comprehensive practice. Here, I'll show how I do it.
That was your thing for a while. How did you get started in that?
Like, how did you get started? And this guy's gonna start a whole story.
It started with me just doing man on the street. I wasn't even doing the Realism dating content. It started off with just me getting myself out of my comfort zone when I was in college. Because for a long time I was like reserved, shy, kind of a loser.
So basically that's the idea. This guy just spent a whole minute tell his personal story. Now you can practice telling that same story because you have a rough idea of what the story was about. And you tell that story with your own words, rephrase everything, try to gather everything from your memory, tell that story. And then once you finish doing that, you reverse back to how he told the story.
You know what? This is my first time out of my house. So
like all this connecting sentences. And basically you pay more attention to how this native speaker structured his story, how he set up a hook, how he raised your curiosity, and how is that story different from the way you told it. There's probably a lot of improvement you can make in your own storytelling. Even though it's his story, obviously he knows that better than you. I mean, that's just a practice and it's an idea. As long as it's like a conversational video content, this approach can be applied to that because people are always telling stories. They're not just saying one sentence, they're not just answering yes and no to each question. And whenever there's a story, you can apply this approach to really improve your verbal English. So there you have it. Hope you find that helpful.
So if you like this video and find it helpful, please like and leave a comment if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time.